Hey, I'm Nick Velarde. I co-host with Jason Thielbar on the world's second finest podcast. Every week we talk about 90s Bat books, but we also talk comics, movies, books, TV, both new and old, that we love. What you're about to listen to is an unedited version of that conversation. This is the To Read Pile. Jason, you didn't read anything. You watched a lot of college basketball.
I did read some. I did read some stuff. I am a book, but I'm not ready to.
Not ready to bring it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll bring that to the To Read pile, but
fair enough. That's okay because I came fully. I'm like Herbie over here. I'm fully loaded.
Or Kirby, who's fully loaded with
Herbie or Kirby. Yes, I read Mage, Jason.
Oh fuck yeah!
I read Mage, the Hero Discovered, and I want to be very clear about exactly what I read because Mage has a kind of like interesting history, especially early on. So this particular version that I read, I kind of stumbled into. I think it's the best version of the Hero Discovered to read because there's 3 different versions. The original came out by Comic Co. The 15 issues came out.
Love Comic Co.
When I was digging into Mage and just how comics were made back then, let me back up. I was listening to an interview with Phil Hester about the 80s comic boom. He was talking about that, about how he got his start.
Phil Hester. Yeah. Phil Hester's the man.
Yes. I really want to read his Slam Brady Gotham Year One book that's coming out. Little shameless Phil Hester plug because guy deserves it. He's a living legend. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
The point is that he was talking about, I always knew that the 80s black and white boom happened, but I never really understood why. And he was saying that basically 2 things happened. The Ninja Turtles happened, which was like small print run, became super popular, and then the books got very expensive. You know, the originals, the first printings. And then comic shops started really becoming a thing, like taken away from newsstands. And they were buying everything. They were speculating on everything because you kind of could, because there wasn't a flood of titles. So what happened is that all these little publishers came up, and basically anybody with like a $6,000 limit on a credit card could be like, hey, kid, make a comic book about anything, and then we're going to print it in black and white, and then so many shops will speculate on it that we'll just make some money. Like we'll get 10K back. I'll pay you for your work, like a couple thousand or whatever, and I'll, make a couple thousand myself, and then done deal, right? So suddenly in the 80s, there was just like this huge demand for artists, but like not enough artists making comics. So like the ladder, the very short ladder to the top just got really long, just like with each publisher, just another rung on the bottom of the ladder, like ready to pull people up. So, basically this is the environment in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So Matt Wagner he was born in 61. Mage came out in 84, but he started working on it in 83. So he's 22 years old. And he's living in Philadelphia, and he starts making Mage. And Comic Co. actually is putting out some black and white comics and some color stuff. And Comic Co. is like, look, hey, if you put this in color, like we can get a better deal. We can get a better rate. If we have X amount of books that we're putting in color, we can get a better rate on per page cost, So the first trade, like this trade I have right here, is not from Comic Co. This is from Starblaze Graphics. The first issues are colored differently. They're colored basically by marker rendering. And that's what Comic Co published. And Comic Co had like most comic companies back then had 64 colors to pick from. We've talked about this limited palette for, publishing, and Comic Co was like, hey, we've got 128. But what they didn't tell you is that a lot of those colors are very dark and print like shit. And so the first bit of Mage got like a rush color job by Matt Wagner. Matt Wagner did mostly everything. Well, I'll talk about that in a second, but he basically did marker renderings for all those Comic Co ones for the first 5 issues, at least. After that, he starts to color with an airbrush, and like he does this process. He recently talked about it on his Twitter, where he does this process where he takes a page and like has to do this. I couldn't even really follow it. It's like photo emulsion thing where he's basically like making a transparency. It's how Lynn Varley colors a lot of like, Batman. What was it? Returns, Rises Again, Dark Knight Returns. Got there eventually.
Yeah. Well, and
so it's how Lynn Varley. It's how Lynn Varley would like paint. So she would get the page, turn it into a transparency, and then like an animator be like, okay, I'm going to tape it down to this Bristol board and then like paint the thing and then like put the page down and then put it up and then paint the thing and put the page down and flip it up. And Matt Wagner was doing the same thing. He was airbrushing.
That's so much work.
It's an immense amount of work, Jason. Immense amount of work. I told Matt Wagner when he was tweeting about this, I was like, if they still colored comics this way, I would not be coloring comics. So anyway, the point is that those Comic Co issues are colored slightly differently than these Starblaze. Starblaze collected the first 15 issues of Mage. This is the run called A Hero Discovered. And then it goes on to do a run called The Hero Defined, and then a run called The Hero Denied. And while the reason that we in our collective subconscious Mage looms large is because in the 80s this came out, that the comics that I read, and then Mage disappeared for 10 years. And at the end of this, he's like, Mage will return, and then nothing. And the reason was the licensing of Mage, the actual IP, got wrapped up with Comic Co. And it took Matt Wagner 10 years to unwrap it from Comic Co. So the next arc comes out in 1997 while we're reading comics and people are excited about it. And I think that we kind of felt that excitement. And at the time, Matt Wagner, he's 10 years older. He's in his 30s and he's like got some fucking chops. Like dude can draw.
He made a name for himself at that point. Like people knew like who he was
doing Batman covers. He's also working on Grendel, another creator-owned series that he was doing. He did covers for The Demon, like tons of stuff. So he's like very hireable. Like I was saying, there was a lot of money in comics in the 80s and 90s and not enough talent to fill all the slots. So Matt comes along and he has like a hit with Mage in the indie comic scene. And then by the end of this arc, he's starting to show his chops and he's only getting better. And it takes him 10 years before he can do the next arc. And then he does a third and final arc in 2017. The second arc and the third arc are both digitally colored, but this first arc is all by hand, all by airbrush. So he actually went back and recolored it for this.
With airbrush?
With airbrush. It's airbrushed.
He didn't just go digital with the recoloring?
No. The digital coloring in the future, he hires Jeremy Cox does the second run or the second arc. That's digital. And then he hires his son, who's an incredible colorist himself, to color the third arc.
Okay.
At any rate, all that history aside, Mage is not very good. It's definitely drawn and written by a 22-year-old. It
Yeah.
is very self-indulgent, not a lot of great, like struggling with perspective, struggling with posing. Like it is the comic that I would make at 22. And I only say this because Matt Wagner, like, is a titan in the industry now, and Mage is a character that has endured. So like these are the humble beginnings of Matt Wagner. And I don't want anyone who's like read recent Matt Wagner stuff to be like, oh, I'm going to check out Mage. Nick said he liked it. And then like open this up and be like, what is this? You know what I mean?
So,
like, I don't want anyone in the weeds.
I'm sure you'll feel this as an actual creative professional, you know, much like Matt Wagner. That like I've recently watched this the show Hot Ones with Bob Odenkirk, and they were talking about like how he's had a couple of duds, you know, in his career, or a couple of, and he was like, you know, and he gave such a great answer because he's like, you know, he's like, yeah, you know, I've had some stuff that hasn't worked. He's like, listen, he's like, anybody who makes anything, he's like, if people criticize it and go, oh, this felt like this way, or felt wrong this way, or felt like that, or felt like, he's like, the people who made it know. He's like, yeah, we know. He's like, a lot of times it's like, yeah, we can see. It's like, I'm sure Matt Wagner probably looks at like the first book of Mage and is just like, oh God, I was all of 22 years old, huh?
You can see growth. Like these really feel like Matt Wagner's first pages, like ever. You can see growth by the time he gets to the end of the first arc, just 15 issues in. 15 issues in, he's done, you know, 300 pages of comics, you know, so he's drawing all the time. And they write in some of the forewords that like one of the editors talks about how like Matt was through everything, like tight deadlines and everything. Like Matt was a total professional, total pro, like even like pulling late nights and making sure everything got out on time. Like again, Matt Wagner, stone cold pro, you know? Even though that he might have felt in the moment that his work was compromised, he was getting better with these deadlines and this level of drawing and craft. The first 5 are inked by Sam Keith. All of them are hand lettered by someone. I should put their name in. Bob Pinaha. So they're all hand lettered. If you buy so Mage, like I was saying, Mage has a weird publishing history.
Yeah.
These are Starblaze books. There's also a hardcover that Starblaze put out with a slipcase that is extremely rare, and I would love to get a hold of it. But I think they only made like 500 of them, because who was making trade paperbacks in the 80s? You know, nobody.
Yeah. Well, and hardcovers at that.
Yeah, exactly. Huge expense for Starblaze to like put something out. And, you know, they're not around anymore. And I don't know if it's because they're throwing money around on hardcovers. I don't know. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, so everything is hand done in these books. If you get the Image re-release of these books, I think that they re-lettered it. And I saw online somebody was complaining about there's some typos that were not in the original. Your mileage may vary with that stuff. I didn't read the Image stuff. I can't speak to one way or the other. I don't know if the Image stuff, I tried to track down pages from the Image stuff to see if it was different than the airbrush coloring that I got in these ones, but I couldn't find anything.
Comparison. Yeah.
I don't know if they recolored it or not or what, but because if they re-lettered it, who knows? They could have recolored it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, would you recommend it though for like, I mean, because I think I still I'm gonna check it out because I've been meaning to read Mage like for ages, you know. But like when you were talking about his progression, it's like I love that though. I love watching that. You know, I think I mentioned it when
I love that too.
Yeah, like when we talked about Tim Sale. You know, like any artist, I love being able to watch either in real time or see their growth, you know, and it gives
absolutely.
It's just so cool to see And I think that like it helps me as a older person trying to start over with
Yeah.
that. Uh
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's just gonna take time. And it's a constant like reminder because you're so frustrated that it's gonna take time. It's like
Right. Right.
it's like, oh, how do you get big muscles? It's like, okay, well, you eat a lot and you lift weights. Like it's not that hard of a it's not that hard to know how to get
Right.
big
Right.
muscles. It's very hard to commit yourself to the things you need to do to
That's
get
the
big
thing.
muscles. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very hard to commit yourself to drawing 300 goddamn pages of comics when you're in your
Fucking A, dude.
20s, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just
Uh,
very even if it is technically your job and you're making money from it, it's still just every day and like you trying to get better and just doing it and so
so
it's a really cool thing to be able to see the fruit of that labor, as the
yeah,
series goes on.
I'll put for YouTube, I'll put up right now like a piece of art from early in the run where you can tell that Matt is kind of like struggling with getting perspective and people the right size in the shapes in the backgrounds. Like you can tell that he's like drawing is difficult straight up. And
Yeah,
like juggling all these things and putting characters in space that makes sense is hard. And now I'll put up some pages of Mage that are like way more polished. And they'll both be street scenes. And you can just see the growth. Um,
yeah,
it's, yeah, you can see it unfold as you read, but you do have to brace yourself because it is rough around the edges when he starts. Um, the thing is, too, is like, so Mage is about this wizard, this mage, who kind of comes to Kevin Matchstick, and Kevin Matchstick's the main character, and he's loosely based on Matt Wagner himself. There's a couple of parallels that happen in the book where Matt moves off of his out of his apartment at one point when he's
hmm
like working on the series in the however long it took to work on this series, 83 to 86, changes apartments, and in the book they burn Kevin Matchstick's apartment down and he moves to another apartment, so like
just
there's some parallels in there for
that.
Matt Wagner, but it's mostly fiction.
Yeah, yeah,
And I would love to talk with him more about like what is and isn't real in these books. And the other thing was that like I was in my 20s trying to break into comics in Philadelphia, and he was in his 20s and trying to break into comics in Philadelphia. So like
yeah,
I was really like scrounging these books for like Philly stuff. And
yeah, yeah,
he just I don't think he was like that good at drawing yet to like really incorporate a lot of Philly kind of stuff into the book, or I just
yeah,
missed it. And we also have to consider these were made in like 83 to 86. So no internet, no Google Images, no Street View, no like
yeah. The
no
reference
SketchUp. The
yeah, you have to
yeah,
build your own reference library.
yeah,
I
and he's
I used to
22, so
have
he's just starting. He's just
yeah,
starting.
I used to have a stack and I used to buy them on a regular basis, especially when I found a place that was like a newsstand, like any place that had a
Mhm.
lot of magazines. I would flip through and buy interesting fashion magazines. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
like a lot
Because you
of
had
them
to.
that,
You didn't have any
yeah,
pictures of anyone otherwise, in any kind
yeah,
of like dress at all.
those like phone book size, like men's,
Yeah.
women's fashion magazines were just like, it's like, yeah, because it's just, yeah, it's going to have a crap ton of like, I probably started doing that because I think, one of our art teachers, I'm sure it was probably a pretty common thing in the,
Yeah.
I think they would bring in a lot of that kind of stuff, like for like reference,
When when I was a kid, oh man, I'm tying this back to Phil Hester. I just realized that. Uh when I was a
He's always been
kid,
there with you, Nick. Phil has always been there with you.
I was in college. So I put a portfolio together that was fucking awful. And going to Comic Cons just to like get the experience, fell in with like a very ambitious crowd in college, and so I ended up being at a lot of comic conventions, and I my friends and I had kind of like conned our way into Gaijin Studios, which was Cully Hamner, Adam Hughes, like their studio in Atlanta. And it was like one of the conventions, and they were throwing a party. And so I got to like go to this studio where like I got to see like walk around where Adam Hughes works. And I'm like all of like 2019, don't know shit about shit. And then like Phil Hester's there, and like I have my teacher's voice in my brain from my professors from college being like, if you talk to comic professionals, don't talk about comics, and like because they don't want you to be a fucking fanboy.
Yeah.
Just be like the real advice is just be a normal human being, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, what the fuck am I going to talk to Phil Hester about? I have to be like a normal human being, and I'm 19, and I'm like, so got any kids? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay. just Jason, just in the weeds, in the
God.
weeds.
I just
as a
like,
kid.
there are many reasons, many reasons why I'm thankful that I've known you for most of my life. But like one of them is that like I can just like I'm picturing your voice and mannerisms just like perfectly in my head, just like exactly.
Oh my God.
You
Anyway, the point of the story is that I was in Gaijin Studios, and they had like floor to ceiling reference books. And this was like 2002, 2003, maybe. They had like a gigantic library, and it's like, it looks like a crazy person put the library together, because it's just like, hey, here's a book on horses. Here's a picture book on horses. It's just like, why do you have this? And it's because you need to draw some fucking horses every once in a while, you know?
Yeah. And you can't always remember how to just bust out a horse. Yeah.
At any rate, so Mage, you can tell, is built by somebody in their 20s as they're learning to draw, as they're trying to figure out how to make a reference base in the 80s. And it suffers from that. It looks like 80s independent comics. And as you go through this arc, these 15 issues, you get to the end and you're like, there's Matt Wagner. There's the chops. Like you start to see the glimmer, and to his credit, Mage is a character that he is like committed to and has endured, and you could tell is close to his heart, and like that kind of stuff should always be celebrated. The books are about a wizard who kind of like talks to Kevin Matchstick in this like odd kind of way, and then like he witnesses a mugging, and then the mugger turns out to be this like creature. What are they called? Like a Gunkelfunk or something like that. There's like some weird name. They have spurs on their elbows that are poisonous, and he goes to punch the guy, and he punches through a wall, and he's like, oh, that's weird. I wasn't able to do that, you know, like, and then the bum on the street that he was talking to turns out is a mage, and he's like, oh, there's like good and evil, and like you're activated, and like, you know, I'm a magical person, but I can't intervene because you're the hero. And like, you know, it kind of like escalates from there. He pulls a lot of lore from Fey folk and like stuff like that. Like red caps are kind of like a grunt, like bad guy in it, which are like real quote unquote real fables from you know, that kind of stuff. That, you know, red caps and iron boots, and they stomp you and on staircases and stuff like that. Yeah, and it kind of escalates from there. He meets a ghost of a detective that can't remember why. He's like, because he's a ghost, he's losing his long-term memories, forgetting who he was, but he's still a detective. So he like kind of teams up with them. And also a mysterious woman with a like classic car, like Cadillac thing with fins that's like uniquely hers, and all of this comes together in a way that's kind of interesting, actually. He pulls from, I was reading that he's pulling from some Shakespeare stories. And again, 20 years old, pulling from things that, like, you know, he's probably not totally grasping, or he's like, oh, this is literary, so I'm going to pull from this, you know?
Well, yeah, or probably like, I'm not exactly sure how to tell a story yet, but this person
Right.
does. So
Right.
I'll take this thing, and like I have a beginning, middle. Yeah.
Can't go wrong with the bard, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
use this as a framework. So I don't know enough about Shakespeare to really know Mage from Shakespeare, but this is just what I read online about Mage in general. But it ends in a really interesting way. I don't want to give it away because I do want people to read it.
Yeah, I kind of do really want to read it. I mean, I've been wanting to read it, but you're putting it up there for me on the
it's
in the list.
If you like process and you like how comics are made and you like seeing an artist go on a journey, I think Mage is for you. If you just want a solid story out the gate, Mage is not for you. I was thinking about because Mignola pulls a lot of, you know, Fae and stuff like that for Hellboy. And like Hellboy is Seeds of Destruction, you can debate on if it's as great as the rest of Hellboy. I think like John Byrne helped co-write it, and I think that you can feel that, like John coming through it, because it's very wordy. But like once Mike kind of like figures out what he wants and where he's going, like Hellboy turns into something exceptional. But it starts out almost fully formed.
Yeah.
And it's like Seeds of Destruction is very readable.
It's a good point. I never thought about that before. Sorry, no, I don't want to get off on a Hellboy discussion.
Mage does not start that way, even though it's kind of pulling from the same thing. So you can tell that Matt's figuring it out as he goes. I loved it. I know it's not for everyone, but I wanted to bring it to the to read pile. I'm going to get more of it whenever I get a chance.
That's honest to God, a solid recommendation, and I think something that I'm going to use more as a guiding light of what I bring to the to read pile, you know, because it doesn't always have to be something that I really liked, you know. Or that, like, I think, it doesn't have to be like a pure,
if somebody's trying to get into comics for the first time, I would not give them Mage. If they started getting into Grendel, or they read a Matt Wagner story in the regular DC continuity and they were like, what else has he done? I'd be like, oh, you should check out Mage for these reasons. But know that, like, or if they're getting into indie comics, or they want to know about the 80s boom of indie comics, like Mage is a great place to talk about that. But like I said, it needs to be couched in, like most art needs to be couched in context.
Like not only was Matt Wagner young, but Matt Wagner was listen, there are other 22-year-old comic book artists, I'm sure, in the 80s, but like those people like had editors and experienced inkers and people being like, hey kid, draw
Sam
this
Keith
like this.
Inks the first series, and it's not great Sam Keith. Like, it's a lot of like weird hatching and like,
well, because they're about the same age, right? So they were both probably in their early 20s at that point.
I wonder if they were both in Philly. I don't know.
Could have been.
I don't know that for sure. But you can tell that like Sam Keith even is like figuring it out on the page. You know what I mean? Like, he isn't the max yet. He's still like kind of figuring things out inking wise. He's putting a lot of marks down. It looks like Sam Keith, but it's like, oh buddy, you haven't figured it out yet.
Oh man, now I'm even more excited. Yeah.
If this sounds like, if you have been riveted to the process that I have been describing, then Mage is for you. If you are like, this sounds like it sucks, Mage is not for you.
That's all right.
Or maybe jump in 1997 to 1999, The Hero Defined. jump into the second arc. Maybe I haven't read the second arc yet, so I can't speak if that's like a good place to pick it up. But I assume they'll probably recap it, right? They'll probably.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Probably.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to try to track down those Comic Co single issues whenever I'm at a con. I'm going to try to see if they're.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're expensive or not, but I can't imagine.
Who knows?
Crazy expensive. I don't know.
Who knows with us comic book nerds, man. You'll like see a book that's like $500 and you'll be like 8 people even know of that book's importance. How is it $500?
Yeah. That was like when we went. I'll close with this story. When we went to Sarge's, the last time I was up, and I was looking at what was it? They had Secret Wars comics on the wall, and they were priced at like $50 a pop or something. And I was like, what the hell is that? I was like, I got 10 years ago, I got drunk and I bought 2 of these like on eBay for like $10. The whole run, just twice, accidentally.
I
don't know.
I miss your drunken online purchases.
Oh my God, Jason, there's no way to live. Let me tell you that. It's a fun story, but it's no way to live. It has to stop at some point.
Yeah, it's a young man's game is what it is.
It's a young man's game.
To bring it all back. It's a young man's game.
Oh, man. Yeah. But yeah, I went in expecting a seasoned Matt Wagner, and what I got was a bunch of odd emotions, because it's like he's in 20 years old in Philadelphia making comics, like struggling to make it happen, and like you can tell he's getting better as he goes. And I was doing the exact same thing. It's just he was doing it in the 80s and I was doing it in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, you know? So it was just like, I don't know, like a weird moment. I don't know.
Anyway, there's a fun parallel.
That's Mage. Jason. Yeah. If people want to reach you to tell you about Tumblr, where do they do that?
They can reach me at Twitter, on the Twitter machine, at King of Black Acid, and at the World's Second Finest podcast. That's World's Second with a 2. I will remember to update the Twitter page and be a little bit more involved with the World's Second Finest Twitter account, just a tiny bit, nothing crazy, but I feel like I'm just doing anyone who actually takes the time to listen to us like a bit of a disservice with for not being out there at least a little bit.
Man, I got to get you to join my Discord, because there's a World's Second Finest room and I just never remember to drop the pod in there. I'm just like, I continue to be just as bad about promoting the podcast as I am about promoting my own books. So, it is what it is.
I have lurked a little bit. I'll start being a bit more active in the Discord as well. Make my presence known.
That'd be great
there. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Where can they find you?
Oh, they can find my Discord under my Linktree. That's linktree.com/nickphil. That'll have a list of everywhere that I'm at, including the YouTube, if you want to check out some Mage art so you can kind of get a handle on what we're talking about, or the Discord where I'm chatting, or my half-dead Instagram and Twitter, because social media is a hellscape, and I'm not on there that much anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, don't need it.
Unfortunately, not sure.
Fortunately, yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.